So before we begin, let's have a short prayer through singing this music. Oceans rise and thunders roar. I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are king over the flood, and I will list you, though you are God. Oceans rise and thunders roar. I will soar with you above the storm. Follow me, over the flood. I will list you, though you are God. I will list you, though you are God. I will list you, though you are God. Alright, so before we proceed to our discussions, let's have a short recap about the topic last meeting. So may I call on Balbin Annette. What is our topic last meeting? Okay, very good, Miss Balbin. So our topic last meeting, it's all about bibliography. And here in bibliography, we learned how to cite our resources through primary, secondary, and tertiary resources. And now, let's proceed to next slide. So here I prepare short activity, and the title of our short activity is 4 pics in 1 word. I know everyone is know this activity, and I think you will enjoy it. Okay, so here is the first image. Here, may I call on Miss Bermas? What is the answer in this first image? Okay, very good. So the answer is language. As you can see, there are different language here. Different say hello here and talking people. So the answer is language. So here, next slide. Okay. So may I call on Miss Villalba? Please stand up. So what is the answer in this image? Okay, good job. The image is verbal communication. So as you can see, there are something talking. So that is verbal communication. So I will discuss later what is verbal communications. Okay, next slide. So here may I call on Miss Bonus. What do you think is the answer in this image? Alright, very good. Non-verbal communications. So as you can see, they are used their hand gestures to communicate. So, and we have, may I call on Miss Borgonia, please stand up. What is the answer in this image? Very good. So the answer is written communications. Very good, Borgonia. And lastly, we have, may I call on Miss Brosello Alayame, please stand up. So what do you think is the answer? Visual communication. Very good. Very good, Miss Brosello. So the answer is visual communications. So let's move on to the next slide. So our topic for today is all about language and types of communications. So let's move on to the next slide. So can you please read Miss Carrera the objectives? Okay, thank you, Miss Christine. So objectives. So our objectives, at the end of the lessons, the students should be able to first explain the language and communications. Second, define language using their own words. And third, identify the 4 types of communication and give example. Okay, let's proceed to the next slide. So here, first, we have what is language. Miss Cirojales, can you please read what is language? Okay, thank you, Miss Cirojales. So, language is a system of communications which consists of a set of sounds and written symbols which are used by the people of a particular country, region for talking or writing. So language, so when we say language, it is a system of communication. In language, we use vocal voices to communicate to other people. Alright, so that is language. Do you have any question about what is language? None so far. Okay, let's proceed to the next slide. So here, we can differentiate what is the difference between the language with big letter L and the language with small letter L. So first we have the big letter L. Language refers to a system of communication unique to human beings that make a written and vocal system. So in language with big letter L, so the language is refers to a system of communication unique to human being that makes of written and vocal symbol. So that is the language with big letter L. And next is a language with small letter L. So a language, on the other hand, is subcategory of this type of communication particular to a particular people, region, geographical region, or socio-political background. So that is the difference between big letter L language and small letter L language. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So we have types of communications. Let's proceed to the next. So we have first verbal communications. So can you please read, Miss De Guzman, what is verbal communication and also the examples? Okay, thank you, Miss De Guzman. Verbal communication is an oral communication with words that you or others speak out loud. So when we say verbal communication, it is a way of communication that using our vocal voice. So in verbal communication, we use our language, we use our voice to communicate to our or to other people. So that is verbal communication. And here are some examples of verbal communication. The first one is speaking to another person over the telephone. The second one is face-to-face discussions. And the third one is debate. Okay. So, Miss Diniega, please stand up. Can you please give me one example of verbal communications? Good job, Miss Diniega. So, one of the example is thesis defense. So, in thesis defense, you need to use your vocal voice to answer the question of your panel, right? So, that is the example of verbal communication. So, let's move on the next slide. So, the second one is non-verbal communication. So, what is non-verbal communication? Can you please read Miss Dumagat Mara? Okay, thank you, Miss Dumagat. So, when we say non-verbal communication, is the transfer of information through body language, facial expression, and gestures. So, if in verbal communication we use vocal voices to communicate to other people, to our friends, in non-verbal communication, we use our body language, gestures, and facial expressions to communicate, okay, to express our communication, our feelings, so non-verbal. So here, there are some examples of non-verbal communication. The first, smiling when you meet someone to convey friendliness. So, di ba, pag tayo nakakakita ng mga friends natin and nag-smile tayo, so through that, we are friendly. So, can you please give me Miss Dumas Krisha example of non-verbal communications? Alright, very good. So, one of the example of non-verbal communication is the sign of thumbs up. So, what is the meaning of thumbs up? So, that the meaning of thumbs up is, it's either I am okay or alright. Diba? Yun yung meaning. So, for example, yung thumbs down, ibig sabihin you're not okay or you're in a bad mood, diba? So, that is the meaning. So, there are so many ways to express our feeling to body language or to gestures. So again, non-verbal communication, we use our facial expressions, body language, and gestures to communicate to other people. So that is non-verbal communication. So don't be confused between verbal and non-verbal communication. Again, in verbal communication, we use very good vocal voices. And then in non-verbal, we use correct non-verbal communication. In non-verbal communication, we use gestures to communicate to other people. Very good. Okay, here we go. Let's proceed to... Alright, so we have the third one, written communication. So may I call on Miss Flores? Can you please read what is written communication? Okay, thank you, Miss Flores. So, written communication is any written message that two or more people exchange. Written communication is typically more formal but less efficient than oral communication. So, written communication, it is the communication that uses technology. So, this part, we use technology to communicate to other people. So, these are some examples of written communications. First, we have emails and text message. So that is the example of written communication. So may I call on Miss Gonzalez? Please stand up. Can you please give one example of written communication? Correct, messenger. So everyone, we use messenger. So through messenger, we can communicate, we can type, we can type what are we going to talk, diba? So we use messenger to communicate to other people. So for example, I am here in the Philippines and my mother is in the US. So makakapag-communicate pa din kami through using Messenger. So that is one is the example of written communication. Good, very good, Miss Jan Jan. Okay, so let's bow down to visual communications. So, in visual communication, can you please read, Miss Lagarto, what is the meaning of visual communication? Okay, thank you, Miss Lagarto. So, when we say visual communication, it is a way that people communicate and share information through image and visual. So, if in verbal communication we use language to communicate, we use vocal voices. In visual communication, we use image or visual image to communicate. So there are some, for example, mga symbol and visual image. So that is the example. So that is visual communication. So here there are some example of visual communication. The first one is the signs of no smoking, no parking, screen recording, and videos. So okay, so that is the example. So may I call on Miss Lungkay, please stand up. Can you please give me one example of visual communication? Correct, PWD. Very good, Miss Lungkay. PWD sign. So we know all that PWD sign is for those people who have a special needs. So for example, when you are inside the Jollibee, you can see the PWD sign in their sa kanilang CR or sa line ng mga special needs, di ba? So that's through that we can communicate and we can understand that line is not for you because you're normal and there are and you because you are normal, and that line is for those people who have a special needs. All right, so that is so visual communication is so very important for us, right? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, right. So may I call on Miss Peralta? Can you please identify the 4 types of communications? What is the 4 types of communication? Good job. So the 4 types of communication is verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual communication. So may I call on Miss Raimundo? Please stand up. What is non-verbal communication again? Alright, very good. So when we say non-verbal communication, we use our vocal voices to communicate. So may I call on Rolente? Stand up. So what is non-verbal? What is the difference of non-verbal and verbal communication? Good job, Miss Margie Rolente. So in verbal communication, like what your classmates said, it is used verbal vocal voices. And then in non-verbal communication, we use our gesture, body language, and also facial expression to communicate. So alright. So let's proceed to our so before we proceed to our short activity, do you have any question, clarifications? Okay, none so far. So let's proceed to the next slide. So here I prepare your practice activity. So the title of our activity is guess the image. So please get 1/2 sheet of paper and answer this activity. So I will give you 3 minutes, I think 5 minutes to answer this activity. So the direction is look carefully at the picture and guess if that is verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual communication and language. So you will identify if that image is verbal, non-verbal, written, visual communication, and language. So your time will start now. Alright, have you done our activity? Okay, so let's proceed to the answer key. So let's check your activity. So the answer in the first image is language. Number 2, the answer is verbal communication. Number 3, we have non-verbal communication. Number 4, written communication. Number 5, visual communications. And number 6, verbal communications. Who get a perfect score? Wow, very good. You get a perfect score. So you truly listen to my discussion because you got a perfect score. Okay, so let's move on in the next slide. So here your individual activity worksheet. So this will be your activity and this is individual. So this is the directions. Define language using your own words. Explain the purpose and importance of language, minimum of the 150 to 200 words. So this activity is individual. So you are going to do, I think you will pass it tomorrow in our meeting. So here is the rubrics for our essay activity. The first one is originality. We have 10 points. Content and relevance, we have 10 points. Organization of the ideas, we have 10 points. Creativity and visual impact, we have 10 points. And lastly is timely submission, 10 points. And the total of 50 points. Do you have any questions, clarification to our short activity? To our individual activity? Oh, yes, Miss Dinyega. Here in creativity and visual impact, here you need to do is to design your paper. You need to design your paper. So, if your activity is have a design, so I will give 10 points. Alright, so anything questions? Alright. So, let's move on to the next slide. So, here is your assignment. So, directions is enumerate the 4 types of communications and give two examples for each based on how you understand the discussions. Okay, so you need to enumerate the 4 types of communications. Again, what is the 4 types of communication? Verbal communication, non-verbal communication, written communication, and lastly, visual communications. And then you will give the 2 examples each. Alright? So do you have any questions on your assignment? None so far. Okay. Next. Okay. So that will be the end of our discussions. I hope you learned something on our discussions. If you have any questions and clarifications, so don't hesitate to send me DM or private message on our messenger. So that's all. Thank you, class.